Hey everybody, and welcome to Rock Video Rental. I am Brandon, and with me as always is Caleb. And we are continuing on with Awesomely Bad. This time, for this month, we're going to be talking about awesomely bad horror movies. And this week we got a fun one in Critters. But before we get to that, Caleb, what have you been watching?
I have been continuing with Bob's Burgers. That's my go-to um, end of the day. Watch at least an episode before I crash
Right.
show. It's pretty good. Definitely better than I kind of expected. So a nice filler after finishing and catching up with Family Guy. I also did get a chance to watch the first episode of the new Fallout series.
Okay.
So if anyone's not familiar with that, Fallout is based off of a popular video game franchise. I've actually not played any of the games, but it's one of those things where I've known some people who've had the games and seen some gameplay, so I'm familiar enough with it to know some of the basic concepts.
hmm
So I started watching it, and first episode was good. I kind of felt like I needed to watch it because, man, how many people I had like 4 different people tell me that they watched it and they really liked it, so I was just like, "Dang, okay, like, I get it."
Might be on to something, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see how that progresses because the episodes are well, some of them are short, some of them are longer, so I've only gotten 1 in so far.
Right.
But that is it for me. What about you?
Oh man, King of the Hill. Watched a fair amount of that this week. I've got kind of a smaller list this week than normal. What else? I watched the latest Dark Side of the Ring. It was on ECW Wrestlers Sandman. That's pretty decent. I pretty much knew all the stories about him and how crazy he was, so I didn't really learn too much new, but it was decent hearing like an inside take on it. I also watched the WWE Most Wanted Treasures. They did one on Dusty Rhodes and just going around trying to get things from his career. Nothing big to talk about there. I did watch an episode of Joe Bob's Last Drive-In. I watched him cover the movie Pieces, which is a movie I've seen quite a few times. I own it on Betamax, but it's on the list, I believe, for October. So there's a spoiler. You guys will know that one's coming. It's just a crazy movie. It could be considered awesomely bad. It's really gory and the acting is just ridiculous. Joe Bob said in it, it's like, how do you make a movie with all these great talented actors and have them, they all have their worst performance in it? But yeah, it's a fun movie and it does a lot of things that other slashers don't. Like some areas where they won't go to, kind of. Just it's gritty and kind of real in some spots that are it's a little unnerving, but it's got some terrible dialogue in it that's great. I also watched a giallo movie, an Italian giallo movie called Case of the Bloody Iris. And these movies always have ridiculous names, but that was pretty decent. It was a first time watch. I've mentioned before how I'm like trying to get myself into the genre.
Mhm.
So I've kind of noticed like some trends in those, kind of like how slasher movies have their trends too. So I don't know, it's fun and they're usually like mysteries where you don't know who the killer is going to be. So, and I'm terrible at always figuring out who that's going to be, even in slashers that like are right in your face with it. I'm always oblivious. So it's always new. It's always a surprise to me.
It's
But
always
yeah,
the
that was
butler.
the dog with the shifty eyes. That's a Simpsons reference, by the way.
Nice.
But other than that, you and I both went to the NFL draft in Detroit, so
Oh, yeah.
that took up a couple days.
Wow, seems
That
like a
was
lifetime
crazy.
ago.
I know, I can't believe it was already a week ago that like On the day that we were recording this, it was a week ago that we went.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, 275,000 people there that night we were there. By far the biggest group of people I've ever been in. So it was a fun experience.
Yeah, once in a lifetime. Don't know if I'll do it again, but it was definitely fun to do.
Rock. Yeah, and what's also a fun experience is the movie Critters. So let's just talk about it.
It's a call of the wild and it's called rock and roll. Power of the night, the streets are calling, stealing from the light, shadows calling. It's the power of the night, the streets are calling.
Critters, it is from 1986 and is directed by Stephen Herrick. The plot is a group of small but vicious alien creatures called Krites escape from an alien prison transport vessel and land near a small farm town on Earth, pursued by two shape-shifting bounty hunters. The cast, we have Dee Wallace as Helen Brown, M. Emmett Walsh as Harv, Billy Greenbush as Jay Brown, Scott Grimes as Brad Brown, Nadine Van der Velde. It's weird how that name is split up, but Vandervelde as April Brown, Don Keith Opper as Charlie, and Billy Zane in an early role as Steve. It's funny,
Steve.
I've seen this movie a few times and I never realized that was Billy Zane.
Oh yeah, as soon as I looked it up, I saw his name and I was like, oh gosh.
Oh man. Yeah. I'm assuming this is probably a first time watch for you.
That would indeed be correct. Shocking, I know.
This movie gets kind of passed off and cast aside as a Gremlins ripoff. But I don't know, I'm like it really the only thing it shares with Gremlins is that it's like small furry little creatures that wreak havoc.
Yeah. I so
Because
oh god.
yeah, like the Gremlins were just like a species of like ancient creature that you know, the boy's dad bought from a an Asian store in like a Chinatown or something like that, where the Krites or the critters, if you want to call them, are legit like aliens that crash on Earth.
Yeah, I've actually first time watch for this. I've never seen a Gremlins movie all the way through. So
What?
I know the one time I did watch one, it was just part of it because it was on TV.
Ah, okay. And
So
when I was a kid, I used to love Gremlins.
nice. Well, here's another thing too. Like I got into I don't even know if I would say I got into horror later on. Like a lot of people probably kind of heard my backstory where I don't haven't watched a ton of horror until college, but especially since we started this podcast. But the home I grew up in, one, we didn't have TV. Like, okay, we had TV, but we didn't have cable, so I was always behind on things. But then also, my mom was like super protective of like, um, I guess
What
just
content
scary,
you took in?
yeah, scary movies in general. I guess I would say so. Like, not necessarily just horror movies, but just like stuff that might be like scary for a kid my age.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like, I missed a bunch of stuff when I was younger, and people would be talking about it, and I would see it later, and I'd be like, oh, would it bother me when I was a kid? I have no idea. This though, I totally remember. I remember seeing this movie on the shelf at the movie stores. If if anybody's old enough to remember movie stores,
There's a lot of movies that I remember like that. Evil Dead 2 is one of them
okay.
with the skull with the eyeballs in it.
Mm-hmm.
Dead Alive is another one. Just memorable VHS cover art. And yeah, Critters is another one I remember as well.
What dreams may
But
come.
what dreams may come. And now I cannot say that was one of them.
If that
Uh,
movie even touches Roadhouse, I will
it's
kill
funny
you.
because our movie rental place when I was a kid, I think I mentioned this before, but they also sold carpet and like laminate
What?
Yeah,
Random.
it was in Marlette, Michigan, which is a small town, and the name of the place was Passing Time,
Okay.
and like they had flooring, and then they had like this whole wall of movies and like Super Nintendo games that you could rent.
That is so random.
Yeah, and we used to go there. There was a party store in Marlette as well that rented out movies, but we weren't ever really allowed to go look at them because they also had porn.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so we would go to pass the time to rent movies. That store, I'm not even sure what it is now. It's been a long time since I've been to Marlette. Uh, at one point when I was in high school, there was also like that turned into completely a movie rental place.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and we used to go there quite a bit. But yeah, that was my kind of history with Critters, and I've seen it quite a few times. I think I own it on DVD somewhere. I don't know. I used to have it on VHS as well, but it's definitely more than just a Gremlins ripoff, I would
Yeah.
say.
I mean, I can definitely see maybe inspiration and everything, but to call it like a ripoff, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think it's after the popularity of Gremlins, there was a bunch of like small creature
Yeah.
movies being released.
Hmm.
Uh, Ghoulies, Gremlins,
Trolls.
uh, Troll, yep. Munchies is another one.
Okay, I don't know that
Yeah,
one.
I've watched part of that one. I haven't watched all of it. And another one that pops off the top of my head. Man, I had it for a second. Oh, Hobgoblins,
Oh, yeah.
which is pretty terrible. It's one of the worst movies ever. But that might be added to the list sometime for an awfully bad month. I mentioned this to you after I watched this. I was like, maybe this movie wasn't like fitting perfectly with any awesomely bad because I don't think it's really a bad movie. Like, yeah, it's hokey and cheesy, but I don't think it's necessarily bad. Like the acting performances weren't really awful.
Yeah, no, it's not an awesome movie by itself, but it leans into the quirky, quote unquote, bad elements to take it from just being like, I don't know, a par movie and like bringing it up a notch or two. So I guess, I don't know, that might not be the best explanation, but you could simply pass over this movie. But since it kind of like leans into what it is, it elevates it a little bit. So I see the relation between it being in the category of awesomely bad. I guess that's one way to say it.
Yeah, I
So
think the concept it's goofy and it's really only a movie that would happen in the 80s.
yeah.
There was a lot of like horror movies in the 80s that were quote unquote fun. I
Hmm.
actually just made like a video and put it on YouTube of 5 fun horror movies. I didn't have this one included because we were already talking about it in the episode, but Ghoulies 2 was one of them, which I think is better than the original Ghoulies. But yeah, something like this and Night of the Creeps and stuff like that. Like the concept is kind of goofy and dumb, but they're just fun movies.
I
It,
think kind of to go into that, what you're saying, like about how like they leaned into it and made it fun. Like, because this movie was kind of on the borderline where they could have easily taken it serious. But I
yeah.
think three of the main elements that were just kind of like, okay, they're having fun with this movie is how weird the bounty hunters were.
Yeah.
Like they leaned into that, and then the Charlie character was definitely, they didn't do the atypical like, oh, this dude's just crazy. They made him like comedic crazy.
Yeah, he's almost like Ernest.
Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of. You haven't seen it, but Ernest Scared Stupid. It kind of reminded me of that in parts because Charlie's like warning everybody that he saw the aliens and nobody believes him because he's always just telling stories.
Yeah.
And that's how Ernest Scared Stupid is he knows that he saw this troll, this evil troll, and no one will believe him because he's always just telling stories and he's just wacky Ernest. And that's what this reminded me of a little bit, which Ernest Scared Stupid came out way later than this.
Nice. Well, the last thing is that they could have tried going serious with the critters, and maybe they kind of did to a certain extent, but then when they had them talking, like
Yeah.
they totally went for the comedy aspect with how they were talking.
Oh yeah, if we're talking about the critters speaking and their own language and so it's subtitled and everything, uh I think probably one of the most famous lines from this is one critter says to the other one, "Oh, the humans have weapons," and one says, "So what?" And then somebody pops up with a shotgun and blows the one away. It says, "So what?" And then the other one looks at him and says the F word and runs off.
Yeah,
Uh,
precisely.
just so funny. Another thing I think this movie does great is that the special effects are pretty good.
Yeah.
The critters look really cool. That's a pretty cool design. And it's just like, okay, it's this furry little creature, but they're like almost like little Wolverines. They're vicious for how little they are.
Mm-hmm.
And
Little fur balls.
yeah, like they have these big teeth and like can move really fast. They can roll across the ground. And then they have those spines that shoot out of them like harpoons.
Yeah, that I was not expecting. I was kind of like, what that that was a little bit of a surprise there.
Yeah. Um, and more special effects is like with the bounty hunters, they can shapeshift. Like how their faces are just kind of like this flat, palish green,
Mm-hmm.
and then they can see someone that they want to take the form of, or touch someone they want to take the form of, and then her face just morphs into it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the melting effect in Raiders of the Lost Ark, except in reverse.
Yeah.
Or
No.
like how on Nightmare on Elm Street 4, when Freddy's face, after the dog pees on his body, and then his face just kind of like forms, and like all the
Yeah.
flesh piles on it. That's like kind of reminded me of too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had down that was pretty cool use of that. I mean, especially like with the time that this was made and everything that it was cool and gross at the same time.
Yeah.
So, because they went all in with like, which is a little funny to me because it's just like, okay, all they're doing technically is changing on to take the form and the shape of someone else. Like they don't need to put blood in their system or anything. But
Yeah.
but that's what it was showing.
I think it's funny too that the one bounty hunter picks this rock star named Johnny Steele, who
Oh,
they show his video multiple times of the song Power of the Night, which is a very 80s song.
well, the
And then
other
the other
oh, go ahead.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say the other guy, like he picks like multiple different people to turn into.
Yeah, and that I was just gonna say that part because that part didn't really make sense to me why he kept changing. It's like, why?
Well, at the beginning, after the one guy turns into Johnny Steele, like the other bounty hunter's talking to him, and he's like, "I don't care." He's like, "If you don't feel like that, it's like you need to pick someone so we fit in."
Yeah.
And that's why the one keeps changing because I feel like he's like, "Okay, I'm not feeling this guy, not feeling that one," and then he ends up landing on Charlie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could see that. So, because it just kind of felt like, I mean, at that point, they know they're not fitting in because they didn't change their clothes and the dude kept changing his appearance in front of other people. So it's just like, dude, you're not blending in.
Right? Yeah, it kind of contradicts itself a little bit there.
Um,
The whole thing when they go into the town and they're like asking people, it's like, "Where are the Krites? We're looking for the Krites," and no one knows what they're talking about. And they start getting hassled by these guys in a bar, and they just like lay waste to these guys.
mhm.
That's funny. And then like the cop is shows up later and he's asking what went on and everything, and they're like, "Oh, it was these two really big guys, and they just laid waste to everybody." And the one woman says, "And they were wearing really funny clothes, like they're from Los Angeles." Like that made me laugh because this whole thing's supposed to take place in Kansas.
Yeah. We're
Uh,
not in Kansas anymore.
yeah. I thought that the family was pretty good. Like every member in that acted pretty well.
Hmm.
I mean, Dee Wallace was the mom. If you don't recognize the name, she was the mom from E.T.
Okay.
and she was the mom in Cujo. She was in The Howling. Like she was in a lot of movies in the 80s. And she always played a good like horror slash sci-fi movie mom,
Hmm.
I felt like. And I think even before she started playing mom roles, she was more of like the lead woman. And they kind of like when she started playing mom roles, they kind of dialed back her like sex appeal, I guess. Put her in more like frumpy dresses to make her more momish.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
because there's
yeah.
definitely more movies in the 80s where she's more of a promiscuous character, I guess, than
Huh.
like the straight-laced mom.
Well, one thing that I thought was funny about her character was how it seemed like she was over the top
Yeah,
stay-at-home mom. Like she was always wearing a dress, and she like the breakfast that she made was like ridiculously huge, and of course, as is the fashion of every movie, like nobody eats it. They're just like, oh, I gotta go.
yeah. The son grabs like a piece of toast and slams orange juice and runs off.
Yeah.
That's about it. In every single movie. Yeah, every time they show her like she's in the kitchen working on something.
Mm-hmm. In a dress. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
in a dress
I
and an
seriously
apron
thought
too.
like it was like a Sunday or something, and they were gonna go to church.
Wearing her Sunday best.
Yeah.
Uh, and then Scott Grimes as the main character, as the boy. Um, Brad, I thought he was pretty good. He shows up in the sequel as well, the second one.
Okay.
There's a few sequels to this, by the way. Actually, Leonardo DiCaprio's in the third one.
Oh, seriously.
Yeah, as a very young kid. I think it was like his first movie
That's funny.
because he did Growing Pains right around the same time, the TV show. But like Critters 3 was his first movie. Critters 4 is in space, of course. Every horror series has to eventually go to space,
Yeah, if they
but at
get
least with the
past three
critters that
movies.
came from space. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Well,
they said like because the critters come to like Brad's home, and the dad sends him to go get someone to help, and he runs out and he thinks he's getting cops because he like stops the cop car, and he gets in this two bounty hunters,
hmm.
and they drive back to the home, and the dad's just like, "Who in the hell did you bring?" And he's like, "Johnny Steele and Charlie," and he goes, "Who?" Like that's kind of funny because they show up like these huge guns and start blowing things away.
Yeah. Blow up half the house.
Yeah. And there's one critter too that ends up getting like huge, like human size.
Yeah, I didn't really understand how that happened. Like, was that just from eating?
I think it's from feeding. Yeah,
Okay.
I read in some like facts that this is the only critters movie where a critter grows in size.
Okay.
Yeah, I know in the second one, a whole bunch of critters morph together in like one huge ball. Like they
Okay.
all form together in like this huge ball, and they go rolling through town. And like I remember the scene, like they roll over a group of cattle, and the only thing that's left is like bones after they roll over it because of all the eating.
That's funny.
Yeah, like the second movie's pretty campy. The third one's pretty bad, aside from Leonardo DiCaprio being in it.
Hmm.
Yeah, so like the movie, they're kind of trapped in the house, and then they have to fight their way back. It takes a while to like really get to that point. This is a really fast movie,
Yeah. It
quick
was what,
pace.
only an hour and 25 minutes, I think.
Yeah, right around there. I mean, it's right in that sweet spot for horror.
Yeah, it was interesting because you got that little bit of an intro at the beginning about how the critters were escaping a prison asteroid or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It was a little quirky, it was a little weird. But it set things up. But then after that, I mean, you got to do the development and everything, and so it was a little slow. Got introduced to the people and so on and so forth. But once it got rolling, yeah, it went relatively quick. So it did a pretty good job because, like I said, I want to say until um there was the part where they first attacked because the dad went in the basement. And
Yeah.
basically it was kind of at that point where it's just like, okay, is this supposed to be, are they going to make this really scary, or is this going to stick with a little bit of a comedy element? Because they didn't really, I feel like you didn't really get a good feel for the mood of the movie until about halfway through.
Yeah. It kind of builds up to, they don't really have to wait to see the critters. Like, you see them pretty quick, but you don't know the full like tone of the movie, like you said, until about halfway through, and then you're like, okay, this is just like they know that it's campy,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just kind of leaning into it for fun.
Yeah.
Uh, I like. I'm looking at the posters for these movies. I like how Critters 2 poster is literally just Critters 1 poster with a 2 plastered in front of the critter. It's the same drawing. It's the same background.
That's funny.
Saving some money there.
By the
Um,
way, I had a question. Did Billy Zane get bit in the crotch?
I think he might have.
It was moving kind of fast and I couldn't tell, but it kind of looked like they had one of the critters like jump on his crotch.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what happens to him. I mean, it makes sense. He's kind of like the douchey boyfriend, and he's got a sweet ponytail.
Yeah. It's
This would
just
have made Steven Seagal proud.
I should have seen that coming. You know, like they introduce him and it's just like, oh, here's a side character. He's gonna be dead.
Yeah, and it's
Because what
Billy Zane too. Come on, he's always a jerk.
who only two people died, right? The cop
Yeah, I think
and
so. Two or
Billy
three.
Zane?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
people get
think
attacked. A cow gets mutilated.
yeah, cow gets mutilated, the dad gets attacked, the mom gets attacked, eventually the sister gets attacked. But I think that's it.
Yeah, I
So
think you're right.
so honestly for a horror movie, like not a lot of killing.
Yeah, pretty low body count.
Yeah.
This is a movie too where it's just this is a PG-13,
Mm-hmm.
and like people always hate on PG-13 horror movies, and I think they could be done well. And this is like instance of that. Like, it didn't need all the swearing and like over the top gore to be entertaining.
Yeah.
The second one is also a PG-13 movie. Uh, yeah, I mean, just a fun movie. It's one you don't have to pay super close attention to, and I feel like that's probably why I've watched it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
It's just entertaining.
Yeah.
And it's a really early New Line Cinema movie, and it has that old red and black flashy logo intro, like the first Nightmare on Elm Street. Because every time I see that flashing red New Line Cinema basic logo, it always makes me think of a Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
Uh, so, did you know that this movie, this is not part of my trivia, in fact, it's just something I knew, um, is shown in another movie that we reviewed before? And then you'll never think
Mm.
about what it is, so I'll just tell you.
Okay.
It was in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, seriously?
Remember when Raphael decides to go up into the city, he puts his trench coat on, and he goes to the movies?
Uh-huh.
He walks out, and on the marquee, you can see that it says Critters. And he like looks up at the marquee and he shakes his head. He's like, "Where do they come up with this stuff?"
Oh yeah, man. I guess I never really noticed what the name of the movie was.
Yeah, both movies are made by New Line.
That's funny.
So yeah. Uh, anything else you want to say? We already talked about the special effects and the acting.
Dude, you want to know something that I totally didn't make any notes about, and I feel like I can't remember anything about?
The score?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even really remember what it sounded like. So, I mean, I
Really, the
guess
only thing I remember is Power of the Night.
I mean, I guess if I don't remember it, that's kind of a good thing. Like that
Yeah, it
means it
wasn't
just
distracting.
yeah, it just fit really well.
Yeah.
So
One of those things where it wasn't so amazing that it stood out. It wasn't so horrible that it stood out.
yeah,
Middle of the road.
the sweet spot.
Yeah. It was mid, in the words of the kids,
Oh
as the
gosh.
kids would say.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I guess the only other thing that I can think of that really stands out to me as funny was the bowling alley scene. You know, before they go and they beat up the guys in the bowling alley bar, as they walk up to the lane, the bounty hunters do, and the one guy who's supposed to be Johnny Steele grabs the ball, looks at it, and he looks down at the end of the lane, sees the pins, and he throws the ball down there like super hard, and it explodes the pins.
Yeah.
And everybody's just like, "Whoa!" Uh,
Oh, I had something I forgot. And maybe you can attest to this. Was the intro title sequence a knockoff from The Thing?
it may have been.
Because I totally got vibes of The Thing with
Yeah,
the
how like
like,
the thing burns into the screen.
yeah,
This was
the
like
torn text.
this was more like the digital version of that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I could see that both good title screens, I'd say. Um, oh, another thing too, I forgot to mention. So Brad ends up finding the spaceship with Charlie and his sister. He's trying to like rescue her from the ship, and he goes in and he sets off like puts a bomb down and he lights it, and or he's trying to light it, and that's when like the man-sized critter comes after him, and him and his sister get out of there. And
Yeah.
Charlie lights a Molotov cocktail and throws it into the spaceship, and it explodes. That's $1,000,000 to 1 shot there.
Well, yeah, that's why he almost went pro for baseball, man.
Charlie. Also, he was drinking whiskey. I'm not sure, like, not very many liquors. It's a common thing they show in movies, like, oh, this liquor is like flammable, but it's really only the stuff that's like high in alcohol volume,
Mm-hmm.
like moonshine or Everclear, corn liquor, like these super strong ones. I think Bacardi 151 is also flammable,
Okay.
but just a plain old whiskey like a Jim Beam or something like that, I don't think would explode like that if you threw it.
Yeah, that would make
But in the
sense.
movie, it does.
Yeah, well, there's like a lot of stuff about that. Like, honestly, that would make kind of like a fun episode or some extra content sometime. There's a
Yeah.
guy on TikTok that I follow that does movie prop stuff. But then also there was a trend for a little while about what's something that happens in a movie that's wrong and nobody notices, but you just can't stand.
Yeah.
And that would be one of them where they're just like, oh, they try to make a Molotov cocktail and they basically pretend you can do it with any liquor, but you really can't.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one about something with like the post-apocalyptic movies and with how long gasoline has a life expectancy or an expiration date, basically. So it's
Yeah.
like they would run out of fuel a lot faster than people realize. Is
Yeah.
one big one that I've heard. So,
I know my dad collects old dirt bikes,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes he'll like pull some out of like people's barns, and they'll have gasoline still sitting in there from like the 80s or the 70s, and it basically, he said, it turns like to varnish,
the
and it like almost ruins a gas tank. Like it takes a lot to get it out of there. So yeah, gasoline does go bad after a while.
yeah,
I guess I never really thought about that.
no
Um
trivia and facts.
yeah, there's one thing,
Oh,
um the with Gorley and Russ podcast, like Matt Gorley can always pick out when a character's wearing a bad wig.
Okay.
He calls it his wigdar. And
Nice.
it makes me think of like how I mentioned, how does every person in a movie know how to drive a semi perfectly?
Oh gosh.
Because that's not an easy thing.
Mm-hmm.
But oh, the bounty hunters give Brad that communicator thing, and it puts their
Oh
house back together. I forgot
yeah,
about that part.
that
And
was
then at
super
the
weird.
end, they show the critter eggs in the chicken coop.
Yep.
Mhm. So you know you're getting a direct sequel. But, anything else to add? You want me to get the trivia and facts?
No, let's do trivia and facts.
All right, I don't have too much on here. I'm kind of surprised. There wasn't very much online. But it was a man named Corey Burton who voiced the critters. He also came up with their language, which he describes in interviews as combining elements of French and Japanese.
Huh.
So, although promoted as New Line's answer to Gremlins, the screenplay had been written and bought before Gremlins was announced. Herrick had based the screenplay on a nightmare he experienced as a child long before Gremlins was even conceived.
Okay.
Among the educational videos that the bounty hunters are watching to familiarize themselves with Earth, there's a short clip from the movie Android, which stars and was co-written by Don Keith Opper, who was the guy who played Charlie.
Rock.
The scene of the critters swallowing the cherry bomb was controlled by puppeteers who are positioned below in a hayloft to operate the stomach and eye movements. The crew member named Dwight Roberts commented that it took some effort to coordinate the critter's bulging stomach and eyes as it was kneeling over in the hay due to the number of people needed to articulate it.
Hmm.
So pretty obvious there's an ET doll in Brad's room.
Yep.
And that was kind of like a nod to Dee Wallace, who was ET, who was the mother in ET, like I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, also the critter like ripped the ET head off and ate it. The critter emerging from the toilet is likely an homage to Ghoulies, which came out in '84. That is a VHS cover I definitely remember as a kid of the little ghoulie guy coming out of the toilet.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I don't believe happens in the first movie. It happens in the second one, but I don't remember happening in the first one. This was Stephen Herrick's directorial debut, which I mean, for his first movie, I thought he did a pretty decent job.
Yeah. I mean, not too bad at all. Oh, on that note, not to like interrupt things, but one thing that definitely, when we were having the conversation at the beginning of this, elevates this kind of a more than awesomely bad movie. Like it's a good quality movie. But the filmography and the camera movement in a
Yeah,
lot of the scenes was just really smooth and seamless. Where in a lot of the awesomely bad style movies, like the camera work is really clunky.
yeah, I
So
would agree with that.
yeah.
I would put this on the level of like filmmaking and special effects to something like Sleepaway Camp,
Okay.
where it's kind of like an arguably bad movie, but done very well, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
sure.
Yeah,
Well, they knew what they were doing in this one, where it seems like, and not to, of course, I'm not naming any names, and so not to judge, but a lot of the awesomely bad ones, like Miami Connection and, um, crap, I'm
The
blanking on,
Room.
yeah, The Room, blanking on some of the other ones where it's just like, it seemed like people didn't really know what they were doing unless it
Yeah,
was their first time. So,
right.
yeah.
Complete novice doing it.
Hmm.
That would be Miami Connection.
Yeah.
Uh, so, the prop department actually used Merkins from a local adult store for the critters. Merkins, I I knew I heard it before, but I had to look it up. A merkin is a wig that someone would put on their pubic area.
Okay, then. All right.
Yeah. Apparently it was a popular thing, like I believe in like Victorian times
Hmm.
or something like that. I don't know, but it cracked me up. So Charles Kyoto based the design of the Krites on Looney Tunes character Taz,
Okay. I can see
which
that.
I can see that, yeah. Um, yeah, the Kyoto brothers are known for a lot of like creature effects. Actually, the aforementioned Ernest Scared Stupid, they did the troll design,
Rock.
and they also did the Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh, okay.
Last thing I got is this movie cost $2 million to make, and it made 13 in the box office.
Nice.
Yeah. And now grades. IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, what are they?
Mm, 4.7.
6.1.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Pretty legit. Critic 72%.
50.
Ooh, okay. Audience 70%.
45.
Dang, it went down. Wow,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm kind of
surprised.
surprised.
Yeah,
Yeah, because this movie does have kind of a cult following to it. They actually came out with another Critters movie a couple of years ago. I've heard it's pretty bad though. It's called Critters Attack. But I have not seen it. I saw it on they were selling it on Blu-ray and DVD at Target, I think, is where I saw it at. I'm like, oh, I didn't know they made a new Critters movie.
that's funny.
So great. Our grade. I guess I'll go first. I don't remember who went first last time,
Oh, good.
but it's an enjoyable movie. It's fun. It's only an hour and 25 minutes or so long, so you can get in and out pretty quick, and it's just something entertaining to have on kind of in the background. There's really no like amazing acting in it. Like seeing Billy Zane in this, you would never think that he would become like a bigger name actor.
Mm-hmm.
If you're watching this and you saw it and you're like, okay, what's the one actor in this that I think would really have a big career after? And it'd be Scott Grimes, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I think he did a really good job, especially for a child actor. And he did some odds and ends of things, but nothing like, I don't know, groundbreaking or anything, of mention.
Mm-hmm.
He is in the second one. So if you ever feel like watching that, he was also an American Dad. He's the voice of Steve.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So I think he does a little more voice acting than regular acting now. But yeah, I don't know. It's a fun movie. I've watched it quite a few times. I'll probably watch it more. I ended up falling on a 4 out of 5.
Rock. So I was kind of in between things. So it's a good movie. It's entertaining. It's easy to watch. Um, it's kind of tough because it didn't resonate a whole lot for me. And I know that that kind of sounds bad, but I don't mean it in a really horrible way. Because as we said, there were a lot of good things for this. The acting was solid. The music, even though we can't remember it, obviously was good in supporting the movie because it didn't stick out in a bad way. It was quirky, but in a fun, deliberate way. So there wasn't anything huge to knock on it. Um, it just didn't quite break through to the next level for me because for a movie to be in the rating of 4.5, or 5, like I feel like it's got to be pretty good. Like, you know, good, quite well recommended, and things like that from me at least. And this just didn't quite get there. Because I was hovering between 3.5 and 4, and I wound up landing on a 3.5.
All right.
just kind of there on the cusp of things. And I don't know. There's not quite anything I could really put my finger directly on to say this is directly the reason. Um, but yeah, just a little bit short of getting into the 4 range. So
Yeah, I would say that it's in the upper echelon of small creature movies,
mhm.
but it doesn't really have much to go against. Like the two Gremlins movies are the two best ones. So, and Ghoulies is just stupid fun. And then you got like Hobgoblins, which is bad, and Elves, which is even worse. Yeah, that might be on a list too sometime. Elves. There's an endless supply of bad movies that we could watch.
Yeah.
Quite a few that I've seen that we haven't covered, but next week we're gonna be rolling along with Awesomely Bad Horror, and we're gonna be talking about Jaws 3D, which I've seen a couple times. I'm not like as familiar with it as I am with Critters. I know that it has a really good cast in it, and it probably should have been better than what it was. And it came out around the time of this the 80s 3D craze. Um, Movies that came out around the same time were like Friday the 13th Part 3 and
Mhm.
Amityville 3D. This one is, I guess, a little more infamous and kind of known for a couple scenes, but we'll discuss that next week. If you guys are liking the show, please subscribe and share it. You can follow us on social media. We're pretty much on everything. I got new content going up on YouTube and TikTok and Facebook a couple times a week now. So you don't want to miss that. Some fun short videos and a few odds and ends of things here and there. But come by next week. We'll be talking about Jaws 3D. And until then, as always, be kind and rewind.